Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to everybody in the UK. Good evening, late afternoon to those of you joining us from Pakistan. I know who's on this webinar. It's excellent to see so many friends and supporters who I know. Thank you for joining us. I do know almost everybody, I think, but for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Richard Hawkes. I'm the Chief Executive of the British Asian Trust. I'm really pleased to be welcoming you to another one of the exciting program of exclusive webinars that we've been organising. Today, I'm absolutely delighted that we're joined by Christian Turner, the British High Commissioner to Pakistan, who's going to give us his insights on the Britain-Pakistan relationship following COVID-19. The British Asian Trust has enjoyed an excellent relationship with the British High Commission in Islamabad and also the Deputy High Commission in Karachi for many years. I personally had the pleasure of meeting Christian last year just before his posting to Pakistan began, and I've since met him on a number of occasions in both Pakistan and the UK. I would say it's widely recognised that Christian's doing an absolutely brilliant job and leading a fantastic team of people, and it means a huge amount to us at the British Asian Trust that we're able to work so closely with them all, especially with Mike and Muna in Karachi and Annabelle, who heads the Department for International Development team in Islamabad. It's a great privilege for me, a huge privilege for me to be the Chief Executive of the British Asian Trust. It's such an amazing organisation driven by the British Asian diaspora and His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, and supported by some of the most incredible people across South Asia to make the most positive difference that we can possibly make for poor and marginalised people across Pakistan, India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. At times like this, when there's a global pandemic destroying the lives of hundreds of millions of people, our organisation is more important than ever. In 10 years, we've been able to make a positive difference to the lives of more than 4 million people. And we know now that we're needed more than ever in this crisis at the moment and in the months ahead. We're extremely fortunate to have an amazing group of trustees, advisors and supporters who I'm sure will help ensure that we come through this as strongly as possible as an organisation. One of our strongest supporters is my good friend Atifa Shah, who's been involved with the Trust for many years, including playing a lead role in our 2018 Ramadan campaign, which raised over £400,000 for our mental health work in Pakistan. Atifa has a deep connection with Pakistan and, as well as mental health, has supported initiatives in the country in the areas of sports, women empowerment, entrepreneurship, health and the environment. Bringing about integrity, quality and social mobility through philanthropic and commercial initiatives is at the very heart of Atifa's motivations to strengthen the relationship with Pakistan and the UK post-Brexit through her political, business and philanthropic network. Before I hand over to Atifa to facilitate this discussion, please allow me to just point out a couple of things. We've had some great questions come in already ahead of the session, which Atifa will be asking. If you want to ask any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box. I think we all know how that works now, so please type them into that and we'll then make sure that Atifa gets them and is able to ask as many of them as possible. We are going to record this event as well, which I hope is okay with everybody. So I hope all that's clear, and without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to Atifa Shah.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your kind words. And Dr. Christian Turner, thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction to Christian. Christian was appointed as the British High Commissioner to Pakistan in December 2019. And prior to this role, he held the position of the Prime Minister's International Affairs Advisor and Deputy National Security. He previously served as the Director General, Political, Acting and Director General for the Middle East and Africa, leading the UK organisation of the London Syria Conference in February 2016. From 2012 to 2015, he was British High Commissioner to Kenya, and from 2009 to 2012, he was FCO's Director for the Middle East and North Africa. He has also held various positions in the Foreign Office, the Cabinet Office, and 10 Downing Street, including as Private Secretary to the Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, as Secretary to the Economic and Domestic Committees of Cabinet, and as First Secretary in the British Embassy in Washington from 2002 to 2006. Christian, we are absolutely delighted to have you join us today in this insightful session. And for the audience, as Richard said, Christian will answer some of your questions on the future of the relationship between Britain and Pakistan following this unforeseen COVID-19 crisis. So, welcome, Christian.
Thank you, Atifa. Great to be with you all. Thank you to you and Richard for your very kind opening remarks.
I have to say, Christian, you know, such accolades, extremely impressive. But you know, we've met before, and I want to start with what I think is probably the most impressive thing about you. It has to be your Urdu. So कैसे हैं आप?
मैंने उर्दू बहुत खराब है अतीफा, लेकिन मैं थोड़े उर्दू समझ सकता हूँ. I can also say, if you like, मैं अपने वक्त पाकिस्तान में enjoy कर रहा हूँ, which is that lovely trick that if you don't quite know what to say, you can just drop in the English words, enjoy. It's cheating Urdu, I call it. So no more Urdu now, otherwise I'll be exposed.
Well, I just remember you in Manchester speaking, and very randomly on the stage you asked for pani. You know, so I was just sort of impressed from that moment on how you just casually threw that in. So
you're very kind.
Now, you moved to Pakistan and took up your position, you know, not so long ago. And I guess, you know, in the recent months, as you know, you've clearly been extremely dominated by the global COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I was personally in Pakistan over February, and I was very impressed, actually, with the level of preparation from the government as early on as, I guess, January even. But I want to hear from you, in your words, how you'd summarize the situation in Pakistan. And at the moment, you know, I guess, you know, from February till today, but then also how you feel Pakistan has perhaps managed the pandemic overall.
So, Atifa, it's been an extraordinary 4 months since the virus really took hold here, and actually 7 months since I arrived in Pakistan. And you're right, it's been a sort of story of two halves for me. That early work I was doing to travel around the country, that visit where we met each other in Manchester, all of the effort my team were doing on looking to build the story of the economic opportunity, all of that stopped as the pandemic really took hold globally in late March. And since then, quite apart from the frustration personally of not being able to get out and improve my terrible Urdu, we've been really focused on helping Pakistan respond to the pandemic, and indeed helping the Brits here. So I think the first thing to emphasize is the fantastic cooperation we had from the Pakistani government as we repatriated 25,000 British nationals over a period of about 6 weeks. Some teased me that I'd stopped being a diplomat and had become a travel agent. Within that figure, we worked closely with PIA, of course, but also mounted 21 British government charter flights. That was about a fifth of our global total. So it's just a sign of the size of the relationship and everything we had to do. I think overall, as I sit here now in July, I would say that really Pakistan has done remarkably well in responding to the COVID crisis, looking at where we all started. And I think, you know, every country should come at this with a large dose of humility, including ourselves in the UK, a lot to learn from each other. And I think, including in how it's organized itself very early on, Imran Khan's government set up quite a sophisticated coordination mechanism to make sure all the parts of government, the discussion from federal to provincial level came together in what's called the NCOC. And I think that helped them with their response. They also used a remarkably sophisticated network that we and others had helped fund on polio surveillance, and pivoted that off polio and on to COVID. That's headed by an amazing scientist, an epidemiologist called Dr. Safdar. And he, I think, has given us a lot of confidence in the numbers, a network of about 50,000 people in the field in over 10,000 health facilities to try and make sure the government was responding to the right data. The headlines today are really rather surprising to many people. After a peak in mid-June, when the numbers surged after Eid, as everyone predicted, the loosening of lockdown, of social distancing that had been happening through Ramadan came together during Eid, and we saw this spike of cases in mid-June. But since about the third week of June, that has come down by over 70%. A lot of people have sort of scratched their heads a bit and said, well, why is that? Is it because the testing is too low? Are numbers being suppressed? Is it that people aren't reporting or going into hospitals? And my assessment is that this is genuine, and that for a number of factors, Pakistan has managed to keep the disease under control, and it's taken a path that Faisal Sultan, the top advisor to Imran Khan, and it calls low and slow. And I think for all of that, there are two things that I would be keen for people to take away about what is happening here. The first is that the fatality rate for the disease has stayed low. So it's about 2% of cases, the thing we call the case fatality rate. And that is much, much lower than the world average, which is 4 to 6%, and the UK has been up at about 10%. Now, there's lots of reasons speculated for why that is, lots of scientific research that, frankly, needs yet to be done. I'm just a diplomat, so what do I know? But I do think something to do with the demographic here, only about 4% over 60 in a disease that we know targets old people, and what the scientists call the comorbidities. Things like underlying diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. I think all of that has helped keep the numbers down. So fact one is that the number of deaths has remained very low. So out of 280,000 cases odd now, we've only, I'm going to say only, everyone is a tragedy, we've only seen about 5,500 deaths, compared, of course, to say about 45,000 in the UK. The second point is this balance between lives and livelihoods, which Imran Khan, I think, correctly identified early on as a very big challenge for a country like Pakistan, and that we couldn't just, in a country like this, follow the simple playbook of a lockdown of an OECD country. Now, everyone knows how devastating that has been in Europe, and certainly in the UK, facing our worst recession for 300 years and a contraction of the economy by about a quarter. The government here, I think, rightly said that with about 25 million daily wages, and that would translate into probably 2/3 of a population of 220 million people supported by those daily wages, if all of those don't go out to work, there would literally be starvation. So I think it was a very clear emphasis that there had to be a balance between those livelihoods and those lives, and we had to find a way, if you like, to live with the virus. Hence the emphasis on policies like smart lockdown, where you need enough data to identify the very localized communities where you see a flare-up and you just force people to stay apart from each other. In looking at all this, probably my favorite statistic, which I will test your audience with, maybe I'll test you with, Atifa. Do you know how many people die in Pakistan in a normal year? Normal death rates, number of deaths a year in Pakistan. Any guess?
I would say about 3 million.
So you're high. It's 1.43 million. So the death rate is about seven per thousand.
Recorded, right? But then there's probably many deaths that
many unrecorded. You'd be right. But my point is, and it's a slightly fatalistic, slightly brutal one, but say this number of deaths is a factor of 10 out, and there are indeed about 50,000 deaths in Pakistan. That would take 1.4 to say, 1.49 million. And the country would still survive given the amount of population. So I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think, like all countries, it's not a free pass for Pakistan. But in that context, I understand that balance that the PTI government has tried to tread. My final point is on this, that in no way does that lead to complacency. And I think there's a very important recognition, certainly from me and my team, but including from the leadership here in Pakistan, that they're not out of the woods yet. There's a different story, say, in India, other developing low middle income countries. And I think we're very focused at the minute on the upcoming Eid holiday, the risk that after that, all of the move to animal markets for sacrifices, we see a further spike. Of course, the Shia Festival, Muharram, later in August, return of schools in September. So I think, like most countries, I encourage people not to think in terms of a peak that drops off, but of a series of waves. And I think we are here going to be living with this virus really for several years until we get a vaccine.
I think you're right, Christian, and and I think I guess when you talk about the way that Pakistan has responded, I remember back in April, it was the World Health Organization called out Pakistan as being one of those countries that was seen to be very well prepared, and I think that's testament to the work that Pakistan has done. And I think you're right. Within Pakistan, there's a number of festivals coming up. And you rightly point out Muharram, which is a time where there are marches and and there is congregations, etc. And it's managing that to ensure that that there's not a second wave or a third wave or a fourth wave and so on. And I guess I'd like to kind of talk a little bit, when you touched on livelihoods and the impact of people, talk a little bit more about supporting the recovery. As a High Commission, your role is very much about supporting Pakistan in their growth and so on, and at times in their recovery as well. I guess from your perspective, what role can private businesses play, I guess, in recovery of Pakistan, but more particularly, what are the big opportunities, I guess, for UK investors into Pakistan?
Yeah, well, let me answer your question, Atifa, in two parts. I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right on what I see as our role as a deep and long-standing friend of Pakistan's to help with the recovery. So let me say a little bit about what we're doing as a High Commission and as a government team, and then come on to your question on what business can do. I mean, you would expect an organisation like mine has had to turn on a sixpence and completely reorientate all of our business to COVIDize it, if you like. I mean, I think this event is transformative. I think organisations have to be deeply agile and respond to it, and we've been no different. I particularly praise the work of DFID, which Richard mentioned in his introductory words, who have a big programme here. And they've really turned to make sure all of their work is focused on the young kids, the girls who are now further out of education, behaviour change programs. We were doing stuff on maternal health, on family planning. We've just switched that into encouraging people to wash their hands, keep their distance. There's been some really remarkable work done. And the economic bit of that, to come to the private sector, is very important. So, of course, the economy here has taken quite a hit, as in everywhere else. We think it'll be the first recession in Pakistan since, I won't ask you to name this one because it's an unfair geek question, but it's the first recession since 1953 in Pakistan. And we think the economic leadership here, the state bank governor, the Treasury finance advisor to the Prime Minister, Atifa Shah, have done an extraordinarily good job of trying to tread a line in a budget between stimulating growth enough but keeping on the difficult path of reform that the IMF had set, the deep structural reforms that are necessary. So we need to support that. We're leaning into programs on things like loans to SMEs, helping the small businesses survive, really trying to make sure that our assistance can tide Pakistan through what will be a difficult period like everywhere. So to play that to the opportunity for UK business, I mean, in many ways, my view hasn't changed on this since the speech I gave in Manchester and my remarks. Some of those who were with us may have heard earlier in the year. which is that we've got a very good base. In 2019, our total trade in goods and services was about 3.5 billion, just shy of that. That's about 4.5% up on 2018. But my view is we can and should be doing much, much better. So against the back of that economic contraction, inevitably the government here will be really trying to look at exports, which I think now become a key part of the economic recovery. And the UK remains the largest export market in the EU, the third after the US and China. So I think we've got a real job to do to lean into that. Part of that, I think, needs to be prioritizing a couple of sectors, and either in the Q&A, the chat, or separately. I'm very interested to hear from people which sectors they think we should be prioritizing. I think there's a danger in this sort of environment that we become too scattergun. I prefer with Mike Nithevrianakis, who I think is on the line, and a few other of my colleagues, to really just pick one or two. In the crisis, we focused on healthcare, some of the kind of PPE equipment, trying to pivot those textile experts into doing the masks and the clothing, trying to do some of the medicines, some of the educational products. But I think there are other areas we could pick. Agriculture. So I'd be interested in views on that. And of course, I think the CPEC, the Chinese investment, is not something I see as a threat. I see it as an opportunity for British expertise to get involved. So views on that would be welcome. And then beyond that, it's a familiar story you've heard from me before. It's about our links to the Gulf. 140 firms with offices in Pakistan, 5,000 in the Emirates. They're only 45 minutes from Karachi, an English-speaking city of 25 million people, yet we have this sort of invisibility wall that stops us seeing that market sitting there. The diaspora links, which I'm sure we can come on to, some of the changing perceptions we can talk about. And one thing which I always plug whenever I'm speaking to an audience like this is UK export finance. I mean, this is just a classic case of gift horses and mouths. UK Export Finance doubled its facility last year to have £1 billion of what is, to all intents and purposes, free credit. I mean, they say it's very favourable finance. I mean, it's free credit for firms who are doing deals with Pakistan and can show that only 20% of that deal feeds back to the UK. So it's a very low bar compared to other export credit agencies for other countries. And of that £1 billion, currently, only 3 million is currently being utilised. 3 million of 1 billion being utilised. I mean, it's absolutely criminal. And so it's my gauntlet to everybody to take this opportunity to be part of helping Pakistan in this recovery. Important for the country, important for British interests.
And that's very interesting, and to think that that is just how much is being utilised out of the entire budget. Just, it's probably one of the first things that I will look to do after this call. And so that's from I guess a business perspective. What about organisations like the British Asian Trust, philanthropic initiatives? What role can we play as overseas initiatives, but also how can we support those that are delivering charitable initiatives already in Pakistan? And you have many NGOs that are doing great work in the response to COVID. How more can we support them? I guess is, again, twofold question. Yeah. What can British charities do, but also how can we support those that are doing existing work there?
I think my main request, Atifa, is keep going. Remember that at a time like this, the kind of deep poverty that still exists in pockets of this country. We have about 60 million people, we think, beneath the poverty line, particularly up in KP. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, down in South Punjab. There are people who are going to have deeper need. And if we get the response globally to this crisis wrong, and that's from the big macro conversation on things like debt relief, which Imran Khan has been very vocal on, down to some quite specific initiatives on things like girls' education. If we get that wrong, we could see the path of development in a country like this go back by 15 years. That's, I think, the scale of the challenge. And that can't just be a government-to-government conversation. It can't just be a B2B conversation. That needs the NGOs, the charities, the philanthropists being part of it. And I think if I can give a particular plug to the British Asian Trust, who I'm quite apart from your chief executive's outrageous gallivanting with pop stars like Katy Perry. I pay tribute to the work that you do to help coordinate that conversation. I think the thing I would like to build is more of a single conversation, because as I'm arguing with sectors, I think we need to prioritize the areas where we make our assistance. And I suspect that too often we have lots of flowers blooming, which is great, but somehow we need to galvanize those together to have a single conversation, get the synergies, and make sure that the sum total of that is greater than the parts.
Yeah, and actually, it's probably a good point to just bring in a question from the audience, actually. And this is a question from Sana. The loss of livelihoods and financial strains that we are seeing, and you've touched upon some of those longer term, I guess, consequences of COVID. And in countries such as Pakistan, particularly leads to mental health issues, increased frustration levels, anxiety, depression, domestic violence, and an increase in suicide rates. In fact, in the UK, in a lot of Pakistani, and I'm from I'd love to shout about the fact that I'm from Rochdale. It's a very large Pakistani population, and we've seen here, rises in domestic violence, not just between couples, but also between children and parents. So how can we work towards recognizing, I guess, these longer term consequences and integrating mental health into our COVID response? I guess, what sort of systems perhaps do we need to put into place to work towards this?
Yeah, it's a huge question, Atifa, and I'm not sure I feel particularly well qualified to answer it. It's one of a number of factors that we're tracking. We've definitely seen the same sort of data on mental health, domestic violence. We're quite worried about the gender impact. So thinking through across our efforts, the implications for more inequality on account of gender. So I think as we work through this, we're going to have to make sure that all of our assistance is very live to these sorts of changes, some of which will be immediately apparent, some of which will be consequences of consequences that we won't know for some time to come. I think if there's a handrail for that, I do quite like this phrase, build back better. If we regard this as a globally disruptive event, how do we make sure that, not in some Panglossian way, there's a lot of referring back to work that we did in 2000, and I just left number 10 then, but 2008, after the financial crisis, where the G20 really led the financial recovery. I'm not sure that applies to the kind of world we live in now, but if we're thinking about building back better, I would put on that 3 riders: building back cleaner, more inclusive, and more resilient. So cleaner in a place like this has got to be looking at air pollution, the risk that Pakistan invests way too much in dirty coal technology that isn't only not clean, but actually is going to be more expensive over its lifetime, and it's going to saddle itself with debt, where solar and other renewables are now looking cheaper. More inclusive is these issues of gender, of mental health that I think certainly need addressing. And then more resilient is how we build the governance and the institutions and the system. So Pakistan, actually, I think a famously resilient country, is more able to cope with these kinds of shocks in future. I think that kind of concept to think through how we support the recovery is something that we need to be all talking about.
And I think, and just whilst we're on the point of recovery and support, it was recently announced that the Department of International Development will merge with the Foreign Office. Now, I know, and many on the call will know, that Pakistan has been, long been one of DFID's biggest programs. How can we all, I guess, make sure that Pakistan continues to be such an important priority for the new Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office?
Yeah, so we're all going to be part of this new beast called the FCDO, which I think genuinely it's a merger, not a takeover, and it will I think we need to co-create it and make it feel genuinely a new and slightly different department. I mean, you're right, Atifa. On the ground here, I'm building on the shoulders of giants, my predecessors, and we are fantastically well integrated with the DFID team. My superb colleague Annabelle Gerry, who leads DFID here, you know, we're actually integrated across government. The work that Mike leads with DIT. I've got 12 government departments on the platform. I chair a board on which they all sit. We have a single business plan, a single strategy. So in many ways, apart from the sort of name on the email, I hope success looks like yourselves not really noticing the difference. We'll get on doing work. Development will be a key tools of that work, and exactly which way the wiring goes and how it reports up into Whitehall, I don't think should impact the delivery we're doing. I think the second half of your question is important, though, which is keeping Pakistan as a priority. And it's easy to almost become lazy, perhaps, about a relationship like this. If you don't invest in it, you don't just stand still, you go backwards. And, you know, I'm of course at the heart of that, and the first to advocate the importance to both countries of this relationship. The kind of assets we have, the kind of commonality we have, the diaspora, the linkages, everything from trade to the development you've just asked about, to at heart the people. And I think there's a danger, perhaps particularly with the geopolitics. We see, I think inevitably with the economic crisis that we're now moving into, a lot of interest in deepening our investment in India, which has to be the right thing to do. I don't think we want to have a binary choice where somehow that allows us to tilt one way and ignore the deep ties and assets we have. And fundamentally, that is about it's about our natural advantage here, I can put it like that. I mean, I don't mean that in too transactional or competitive a way. But we can get things done. We can do business in a place like this and have traction and advance shared interests in a way that is not true for a lot of my rival embassies and high commissions here. And so I think we want to, if you like, stack our chips where we matter most. And it's no mistake that my high commission remains the British. It's our largest embassy in the world. And that's for very good reason. So keep talking up Pakistan is my request.
Well, you know, and that's a very important point, because those that know me know that I shout about this all the time, and I've said it to you, Christian, as well, is that we have to showcase Pakistan. You know, we sit here in the UK and we talk about the support that we need in Pakistan, but it's down to people like me, overseas Pakistanis, to really bring people to Pakistan to showcase the amazingness that we have there. You know, and as you know, in fact, I think it was just before you got to Pakistan, I think, or maybe it was yourself. I can't quite. No, it was before you got there. We had the Royal Highnesses in Pakistan.
Yeah, just before I arrived.
Just before, that's it. I'm trying to picture
the
images, or whether you were in them or not. Christian.
No one's allowed in those images except the main couple. That's the truth. No, it was Tom Drew, my predecessor, did a fantastic job with all the team on that.
Tom, yes, I remember. And you know, I guess my question is, you know, and I talk about, you know, not just, you know, having the royal family visiting, but having overseas non-Pakistani business people visiting Pakistan, and for us to facilitate that, having British politicians coming to Pakistan. But I guess, you know, for the purpose of this conversation, can the royal family play a role in strengthening the UK and Pakistan? And, you know, we have seen His Royal Highness's passion for the region and the diaspora. And I guess, you know, the visit last year with the Duke and the Duchess of Cambridge, do you think that's helped relations? Is there more that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, it has helped relations, and it was a fantastic showcase for the country as well as the relationship. And actually, just last month, I think it was, I was very honoured to have an audience with Her Majesty the Queen to present a Commonwealth Points of Light Award to a local NGO. And she I think I'm allowed to say this, and be very careful what you say in public about what you said to the Queen, but she was very enthused about her visits here and remember them very clearly. It was a very engaging and warm call. So that's a very important cornerstone for the relationship. But I think the broader point is the important one, Atifa, and this is one I would really like to labour to this audience, is help be a part of changing perceptions. One of the things I was very struck by when I arrived was an almost lazy negativity which can creep into conversations about Pakistan. And a lot of that was built on the security situation, and that's why when I arrived, I ordered a review of the security threat, and you remember changed that travel advice very early on because I felt it was not a fair, and security is my, been a lot of my business from my last job, so I knew whereof I spoke. And I felt changing that travel advice was a very important signal, and I wouldn't have done it if it didn't reflect the underlying reality. But there is, as I'm saying, a sort of easy negativity that in a way has crept in on COVID a bit. To go back to the COVID numbers, I talk to people who say, oh, well, that's just, Pakistan must just be making it up, or they're manipulating the figures. And actually, they're not doing that. There's something more interesting going on here, as there is in some of these other countries like Thailand and elsewhere. And I think we've all got a job to do to change those perceptions and showcase the positivity here. And that's everything from the natural beauty, the tourism potential when we can get back to it. Yes, the food. If you go to Lahore, you must talk about the food. Did I mention mangoes? Must mention mangoes. All of this. Oh, cricket. Did I talk about the test matches coming up? All of this is part of a much more exciting, forward-looking, positive agenda that I think we can be a part of. And that helps us generate the potential and the opportunity that I think is here to be realized, rather than a story of negatives where I think Pakistan has suffered from a bit of Hollywoodization, maybe Islamophobia in some of the stereotypes about it.
Okay, good. I think what we'll do now, I did have a couple of questions about cricket, so maybe we'll talk about those in a moment.
Stuart Broad is very wound up. Be very careful, I think, is all I can say on that.
We'll talk about. I'll try to keep it light-hearted. Let's take some questions from the audience, and my apologies. These are to the audience in no particular order, but let's start with one following on from Sana's question. Given that mental health is a priority of BAT, what role can the British High Commission play in assisting conversations with the government in developing a mental health public policy and a strategic plan? And that question's from Dr. Aisha from the Aga Khan University.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Aisha. It's a conversation I'd be interested to kind of deepen with you and others. We don't actually, in terms of the programming we do, the assistance we give on healthcare, we don't prioritize a lot of mental health. A lot of our effort and assistance is on primary healthcare. And it's that, I should have mentioned earlier, that on COVID, we moved very quickly, very early on to bolster the WHO's response here. And a lot of the testing you see that's been set up was all done with DFID and British government assistance. On mental health, I think it will be part of that cleaner, more inclusive, more resilient recovery that I talked about. And I hope that, if we get through the coming weeks, and we're having conversations in the autumn with Dr. Zafar Mirza, the Health Secretary, probably Dr. Shireen, the Human Rights Minister, and others, I think there is a conversation we can probably build with various bits of the government here about a proper joined-up mental health strategy. So it's an area I'd be interested to hear and think more about. Okay,
thank you very much. This is a question from a good friend of ours, Asif Rangoonwala, a big supporter of the British Asian Trust and trustee. He'd like to know what is happening with the repatriation of Pakistanis that have overstayed. And is there an opportunity to provide 3-month visas for those that want to go back? This way, people don't feel that they will be treated, as having overstayed their welcome and almost borderline criminal, and have an opportunity to return home with a clean record. So this is, I guess, Pakistanis that are here in the UK to return back to Pakistan.
Asif, nice to hear you, and it's a good question. And of course, formally speaking, this falls outside my remit. and is one we should talk on the detail to Nafis Zakaria High Commissioner in London about. I mean, I think actually, again, for all of the noise, the team here have done an extraordinary job of trying to get people back to Pakistan and keep their borders open. And the worldwide figures is hundreds of thousands that they've been able to travel back. Moeed Yusuf, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, a good friend of mine and a remarkable individual, I think, has really done incredible work along with Zulfi Bukhari and others to try and make that happen. I am not aware that people are being stigmatized by having exceeded visa stays and that they're being criminalized. I very much agree that's not something we would want. And I'm happy to take away Asif and check, but I know that earlier on in the crisis, we were very, very clear that there would, if you like, be a sort of visa holiday, and that if people had fallen off the edge of their stay because they couldn't travel, they wouldn't get penalized. Now, I can't remember, I'm afraid, off the top of my head exactly when that rule ran out. And of course, we have got now an air bridge running, despite the loss of the PIA flights, which is very regrettable. We've still got 4 or 5 airlines flying through Istanbul and the Gulf, Qatar, Emirates, Turkish. So people, I think, are able to travel. But if there are sort of specific concerns, obviously some cases would need taking up with the High Commission in London, but I'm happy to try and clarify the British government rules, because I agree, having people stigmatized, the whole approach we took with our repatriations in March, April was enabling the free flow of that population. 100,000 Brits here, 1.6 million diaspora in the UK. It's the backbone of our entire relationship, and I want that running smoothly.
Good. Thank you, Christian. We have another question from one of our Founder Circle members as well, Shahid Sheikh, extremely well-known businessman in the UK and a great philanthropist. His question is very much about inward investment into Pakistan. What would be, in your thoughts, the right protocol to follow to bring inward investment into Pakistan? And this is very specifically around large investments. So we're talking 9-figure sums, to be absolutely frank. And in order to, I guess, to avoid things like bribery channels, how do we do that? What would be the best, what's the best protocol to use?
Yeah, so Sheikh, good to hear you as well. And it's one where I'd love to get my team working with you, not least because of that kind of export finance kind of opportunity that's there if this is done in the right way. I mean, look, the figure, I think, on the ease of doing business index, let's be candid, is good, but more needed. And there was quite a big rise. I think it was about 20 or 30 places in the last round. It's just one set of indicators, but I think it's one that people pay attention to. So Pakistan is now about 108 on the World Bank's list. I think actually last time I looked at it, the expectation was it would jump again. But you're right that with the kinds of figures that could be involved being described, you've obviously got to be careful that you're absolutely following due diligence and not exposing yourself, your boards and everything else to risk. So it's the kind of thing where Mike Nithafrianakis and his team would really look to work with you, advise you, how to follow the right protocols, make sure you have the due diligence in place, the proper transparency. Some of that's legal, some of that's financial, so that you can protect yourself and your money. So without ducking the detail, I think happy to get in touch and look at how we can help you. It's exactly the kind of thing a good High Commission team should be doing.
And I guess, Christian, have you seen the diaspora trading in and supporting, Pakistan business increase since your term at least, but perhaps even, just before your handover? Have you seen that, trading growth spike?
Not enough is my brutal answer. So if you look at those figures I cited of the full trading goods and services, 3.4 billion went up, 4.5% in 2019 over 2018. I think we should be looking to double that. And that needs a more systematic effort, as I said. I think it needs a more targeted effort on a few sectors. And where at the minute we have lots of good individual things happening, I'd like to bring them together and really focus our collective firepower. So the ambition I had for that in February, March is undimmed. It's just been slightly reined in by COVID, and I hope as we come through COVID, we can reignite that and really consider how we work together on it.
I've got a couple of questions on young people and sport, which again is I really like these questions because it's very much something that I'm passionate about. I guess the first thing, Pakistan needs, and this question is from Tariq Rangoonwala from Karachi, and is also a very big supporter of the British Asian Trust. Pakistan needs better and more sports facilities for youth, like small arenas, velodromes, even stadiums. What does the UK High Commission think about in this regard, as the funding being utilised for I guess UK export, as you said, is grossly underutilised? Are there opportunities for us to invest in these areas?
So Tariq, I think the short answer is yes, there must be. I mean, it's not the kind of thing where we necessarily prioritise taxpayers' money, but there are plenty of good British firms with deep expertise in both the big mega projects, Arab, people like that, building stadiums. I have a pet project, or not a pet project, but an observation that my naked and unashamed agenda to bring the England cricket team back to Pakistan. Ultimately, over the long term, Pakistan needs a ground with a 5-star hotel linked to a cricket pitch, so the whole thing can be run as a single complex. That's how most places do it nowadays. From those big projects, Tariq, down to quite small stuff, where I agree it's about green spaces. We see it, don't we? Every day of the week, the kids playing, in the fields, on the streets. I'm sure there are good British partnerships that would help invest in that. And if done in the right way, could tap into some of that export finance capital. So it's the kind of thing where if you've got a project you're working on, go and bang on the door of Mike and his team, the Deputy High Commissioner in Karachi, and see whether there's anything we can do.
Amazing. And I guess the second part of that question is, and I know recently there was, and I've learnt this from Naeem Raza, who is works with the British Asian Trust. Recently, a footballer, Kashif Siddiqui and Davy Robertson, went to play and coach at Real Kashmir FC. But I also know from my knowledge, Amir Khan, the Olympian boxer, has been to Pakistan. There are local and regional champions within, the Northwest and in the UK, in the realms of cricket, boxing, who do go back to Pakistan and do deliver things, I guess, almost in buckets around the country. And a lot of where they deliver this engagement is based on perhaps their roots and their family background. One is, the first question is, how important is that interaction and engagement? But secondly, can we do that in a more, is there an opportunity to do that in a more formalised way through the Commission, whether it be as a programme or something maybe even the British Asian Trust could support?
Yeah, I like the question. It's a good question, Atifa. And, let's be clear, these people are massive role models, and their ability to inspire, in the sport, but behaviour beyond it is very, very powerful. And it comes back to really everything I've talked about. The thread in our conversation has been about the breadth of the relationship and celebrating all that has to offer. Now, I think I should be honest, I kind of want to have visibility of all that. And as I said in answer to your previous question, I think the more we all have got visibility and it's coordinated rather than happening in buckets, as you described, the better. But I don't think that needs the dead hand of the British government necessarily driving it. And I definitely think there's a role for British Asian Trust. There may be other groupings that just help to make sure that we're seeing those opportunities, and where people need help, a question like Tariq's, we can help make the connections to get the maximum out of contacts which exist already. Now, some of that can be done by my team. Even though we're big, we don't have limitless resource. So, if people are thinking about things like that, do get in touch. We're certainly in touch with Amir. I wasn't particularly focused on the case of the footballers, but it's good to hear about. So, I think coordination and mutual awareness is something where British Asian Trust, I would think, can help, but I don't want it all to have to be forced through a sort of BHC kind of program, which it will flourish perfectly well without.
Good, good. I guess we're sort of coming to the end of our discussion, which has been both enlightening, has been, you know, great to hear the success of Pakistan in many ways, but also the opportunities that exist for us to help further their success in the near future. I talked about cricket before, so I'm going to try and finish off with something a little bit more light-hearted and personal. Christian, are you going to be supporting the forthcoming cricket games between England and Pakistan? But also, you know, just generally, let's talk about cricket, because, you know, we love cricket, don't we?
We do love cricket. I mean, I work very hard with the fantastic team at PCB to make sure this tour happened, and hats off to Ehsan Mani and Wasim, who are just amazing, determined professionals who really are doing great things for Pakistan cricket. We worked back in February with the MCC tour. Kumar Sangakkara came through. He bowled a ball at me and he knocked my middle stump clean out. You know, but what an ambassador for the sport he was. So I'm very excited about the future of cricket here, and we definitely want, as I say, England to come back. And the fact that we've got the team to the UK for these games is testament to all the hard work of Wasim and Ehsan, and so fantastic that it's happening. I mean, who do I support? Well, I'm, you know, I think I'm contractually obliged to support England, but as a diplomat, it's a really easy win, because if they go down screamingly by, you know, an innings and 4 wickets, then I can happily celebrate with all my Pakistani friends and try and take some of the credit. So either way, I think Turner wins, and we'll just enjoy the game. But as I said earlier, I worry about leaving out Stuart Broad from the first West Indies test, because clearly the last 5 days he's been pretty, I don't know, I haven't seen today whether he got his 500 test wickets, but I think where the Pakistani bowlers look pretty hot, I think the batsmen are going to need their wits around them if they're going to cope with Broad in full flight.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting you say, you know, in terms of who you'd support, because I think for many overseas Pakistanis, when we're in England and watching a game here, it's Pakistan all the way. But if you just happen to be in Pakistan during a cricket match, so
I think that a good metaphor for the relationship. I had the pleasure during the World Cup of being at the. I didn't make the famous game in Manchester, but I made the Lord's game between Pakistan and South Africa, which I was honoured to attend with General Bajwa, Chief of the Army Staff. And I have to say, it was to all intents and purposes a Pakistan home game. It was just green. The whole of Lords was completely green with, I don't know what the Pakistan equivalent is of the Barmy Army, but it was an army and it was pretty balmy, and they were having the most wonderful time, and it was a truly special day out.
Well, we're fun people, aren't we, Christian? Which is why everyone needs to head over to Pakistan and see what Pakistan has to offer. Very
true.
I've just been told it's raining for the cricket, like it is in Rochdale, so no play so far.
No play.
I will take the opportunity, Christian, to thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been amazing hearing your insights directly from you. That in itself is such an honour for myself, and also for all those you know, participants that are here on our call and the supporters of the British Asian Trust. So thank you for your time. I will hand over to Richard, who will, I guess, have some closing remarks.
Thanks, Atifa. Lovely to spend time with you and everybody. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much. Christian and Atifa, thank you both so much for that. You were both absolutely fantastic. Christian, you referred to me gallivanting with pop stars. I have absolutely no idea what you were talking about, but I will just have a little sip of water out of my Katy Perry mug. Atifa, we now know that you have another talent that we can add to the list of talents that we know about. We're always extremely grateful to you for your support, and thank you so much for hosting this webinar today. And I'm sure a career in TV presenting approaches, and hopefully more successfully than when you stood and lost at the recent general election. Christian, as I said to everyone at the start, Christian has been a great friend of the Trust. We're really blessed to have such a fantastic relationship with you and so many of your colleagues, and hugely appreciate the time that you spent today. It was great to hear so much coming up, not only about the relationship between Britain and Pakistan, but about the role that organisations like the British Asian Trust and the incredible supporters that we have, many of whom are on this webinar, that we can play in that. It was also great to hear so much about mental health and the role of sport and role models in furthering better relationships overall, but also in dealing with things like mental health. And we're absolutely delighted. It was great to hear so much about cricket and the mention of the Pakistan Cricket Board. We're delighted to have a major partnership with the PCB that's about promoting mental health in Pakistan, and the great program that we have there in partnership with the CareTech Foundation. So all of those things, it was great to cover. We could have gone on, I know, and I know from the WhatsApp messages I've been getting how fascinating everybody has found that, but we're hugely grateful. Unfortunately, we do have to stop. Hugely grateful to both of you for sharing all of those insights. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all of you who joined today. This was a very exclusive webinar just for our supporters and close partners. Please do look out for the program of BAT Insights that we have on a rolling basis. There's more to come through the summer and then after the summer. So unfortunately, we have to end now. Thank you all very much indeed. And thank you once again to Atifa and Christian. Thank you.